Hello, this is Micah, and I want to address some of the stuff that we're seeing on social media online. I don't actually have a TV, but I can tell you that on social media, there's a lot of angry people for very good reason around a lot of different topics. And this is a topic I have not addressed, although it's probably a topic I am best versed in. I have had my entire life filled with different types of traumas. I have had PTSD. I have had family members who have had different psychological, we'll say, diagnoses that I have had to come to learn and become familiar with. And when you have known a significant amount of trauma, abuse, neglect, you become really sensitive, and it's scary to let your guard down or to help other people that are going through similar things or anything that might activate your own personal fear response. And your fear response is highly activated when you have gone through, when you've had PTSD or you've gone through some kind of trauma. But the thing is our society is filled with trauma now because nobody's talking about it. And I am ashamed of myself because I have not talked about it. And then what we do is we end up celebrating people who say what they're thinking when really all they're thinking is hate and fear-based language. And hate is a fear-based language. The brain works on, well, it makes decisions based on love or fear. Those two things cannot cohabitate in the brain, and please research that. If you question it, I encourage you to Google those facts and do some research in medical journals regarding how the brain works. When we're in a fear response, our reptilian brain is activated, our frontal lobe begins to shut down, and as long as we're in the fight, flight, or freeze, living in survival, and that includes if you are living in poverty, which I can tell you from experience, it begins to actually deteriorate your brain. If you have known trauma, you are more likely to be activated into that response, especially developmental trauma. If you have known any kind of trauma or abuse, neglect in your developmental years, then you will perceive the world around you in a different way than someone who hasn't, and you can be easily activated by things that maybe aren't actually a threat. So then the line begins to blur as to what is actually a threat and what is not. This line is becoming blurrier and blurrier because more and more people are going through trauma and they're having children, and their fears are being passed down genetically and also psychologically to their offspring, and it's perpetuating into the society we're seeing now, where people are celebrated for spreading hate just because they're afraid of losing their power, maybe, and they don't understand something, because usually we fear what we don't understand, or they just don't want to. Of course, there's also psychopaths and sociopaths out there, so let's just exclude that from what I'm talking about, because that's a whole different dynamic that I'm not going to get into. I read the book The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker, and it saved my life, literally. I was able to leave a toxic situation and transform it with all parties able to heal and have healthy relationships thereafter. And I know, and that's only one example of how understanding fear and how trauma perpetuates fear, how that has changed my life. I can now recognize other people who are in that activated sense. I can see the wounded, damaged child in a person, an unmet need they're crying out for. But if they don't realize it, if we don't recognize that within ourselves, then we're reacting to everything, constantly reacting. And this is how people are getting shot, and why someone would perceive someone of a different color as more of a threat than someone of their own race or color. So we see perpetuation of sexism, racism, people who have a certain amount of money getting away with more than people who don't have a certain amount of money. There is significant lines being drawn, and it's 2016. And the biggest explanation that I can see from my filter, my perspective, and everyone's going to have their own. So I'm not stating this as a fact, even though partially it is. We are all traumatized people that have lived with literally centuries of suck it up attitudes. You have to suck it up and you have to tough it out, and you are less of a man, less of a human, less of a woman if you don't say, look, I need support to get around this, that I went through this thing and it's coming up again. I did process it. Maybe I thought I healed from it, but here it is. The thing with trauma is those experiences aren't ever going to go away. And when we haven't healed or processed them, felt them related to by another human being compassionately with empathy, then we hold on to them, we stuff them in, they get trapped in our bodies, and then they surprise us. Memories of them may surprise us. And when a trauma comes back, sometimes out of the blue in a dream, things from our past will come up. Spiritually speaking, someone might say that there's a message in there of something new that needs to be processed, which is valid. And sometimes we don't need to have meaning around it. It's just this awful thing that we experienced and something triggered it again. And we need to have the tools to be able to not let that hijack us and be afraid of things that we don't need to be afraid of. If we're constantly in fear, we're not ever going to see when something is a valid thing we should be afraid of, or when it's something that maybe is based on our filter from our experiences that we're projecting out into the world. And there's a lot of projecting happening in this world, a lot. And it frightens me, and I want to do something about it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to continue to have videos and do writing, but I'm going to talk more about how we can help ourselves. And I'm going to encourage anyone who has worked with people that work with trauma, and that could be anyone that helps other human beings, doctors, nurses, social workers, firefighters, police officers. There are countless people that are in a service-based industry or are being paid to be first responders, and they need support. And the more support they get, the less likely things like this are going to continue to happen, the less likely someone's going to be shot down. We can criticize other people, but it still isn't solving anything. I encourage you to visit aztrauma.org. They do regular trainings here in Arizona, and some of them even travel to other states and even other countries, and have worked with the United Nations also. They're trying to get more education to professionals and paraprofessionals, even life coaches that are working with people that have had PTSD, have undergone trauma, and the people that work with those people to understand what's happening in the human brain so we can come at it from a more compassionate place. Excuse that alert, I'm sorry. So please look up aztrauma.org, and if you want to have a dialogue around this, whenever I post videos, because I'm going to post more educational videos around these topics, so if you have questions, I encourage them. Let's only speak of opinions based on our personal experience. We can include facts and figures to, if it's a dialogue that we want to have around something that maybe we haven't experienced. But we need to do more than just share things and talk about how sad it is. We need to come up with constructive ways to start taking care of the human beings that we're supposed to be trusting with our lives. And right now, I don't trust very many people with my life at all. And I think I have a valid reason not to. So let's spread the support, and let's make people who are in that kind of industry feel like it's a heroic thing to acknowledge when they deserve to have some support and help also. Thank you for watching, and I encourage a healthy conversation and dialogue around these topics. And please respect one another's boundaries in the process. And that's the beginning of how we help manage our own traumas and have loving, compassionate relationships with one another. Because my goal is to help continue healing and growing myself, families, community, and hopefully our country. Thank you for watching, and please share. I'll include links below.